My name is James Trost, and this is A2 Insight. Today's guest is Professor Clinton Longenecker from the University of Toledo. Yes. Professor Longenecker, welcome to A2 Insight.
Sir Jim, thank you. It's a privilege to be here, and I look forward to a heartfelt conversation with you and a discussion that your audience will appreciate.
Great. Well, we're glad to have you here, and I guess what I do with all my guests to start out is I'd like to get a little bit more information, or we would all like to know about you, where you grew up, early family influences, and then let's get this up through your early academic career. So where did you grow up, and what was your family life like?
Well, in a nutshell, I'm from Toledo, Ohio, and I've been very fortunate. My mom and dad raised a family of 4 kids. My dad was part of the greatest generation, a World War II veteran. He died a year and a half ago now, at almost age 94, and had a great life. My mom was 92, still alive. And so I grew up in the construction business. My dad had a business that was started by his grandfather in 1921, or quite some time ago. He took the business over, and working in the family business had a powerful influence on me as a younger person in lots of different ways, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But at the end of the day, I had an opportunity to play Division I football. I played football at the University of Toledo, where I have taught for the last 30 plus years. And when I was there, I was shaped greatly by some very powerful people from a mentoring perspective. Dr. Jack Simonetti, Dr. Ed Barty, Dr. John Monarchy. All of these were really influential people that taught me different things about research and academia and how to work with people and how to facilitate. And so over the course of my career, I've been very fortunate to be surrounded by really good people. I completed a PhD at Penn State University, and I've been teaching out at the University of Toledo for 30 years. So I've been very fortunate to be able to do lots of different kinds of things, from teaching, which is my number 1 responsibility. I do a lot of research and a lot of practical research to help companies solve real problems. And finally, I think my role as a community servant and as being a good husband to my wife and a good dad to my kids is front and center in my life. So I'm a very fortunate guy at many levels.
Well, that's a nice introduction to your world. As a professor at the University of Toledo, where you've done really your main part of your career has been teaching, in which department?
The Department of Management and the College of Business and Innovation. And at the University of Toledo, we're in the shadow of some very, famous academic institutions, but we are a terrific place to get an undergraduate education. We're the College of Business and Innovation. And we feature smaller class sizes, applied learning, lots of presentations, case study work. So if you're an undergraduate student at the University of Toledo, you're going to come out with a terrific skill set, and you are going to be ready to get off your mom and dad's payroll, which is pretty important these days, if you would.
Well, and again, Toledo isn't that far for your performing this admissions office role here to promote Ann Arbor. You could even commute there. Who knows? But I mean, while you're there, this is interesting. In addition to what you were doing, you also became the director of the Center for Leadership and Organizational Excellence at the University of Toledo. Could you explain what the mission of this organization is, and how does that integrate with your role as a professor?
Well, most universities right now are putting a big emphasis on leadership. And if you think about your viewers out there, I'd be willing to bet that so many of you have had organizations where leadership seems to be the watchword of the day. So our goal here is to train up undergraduates, graduate students, and business professionals to help expand their leadership talents. And this really applies to the book that we're going to talk about, because I would challenge everybody, whether you consider yourself a leader or not, you are in a leadership role at work, at your home, potentially in your community, at your church, if you choose to be. And at the end of the day, I don't think, as a student of leadership myself and of organizational life, I don't think we can ever know enough about these sorts of things or challenge our thinking to be able to really know how we can have the best possible influence on the people around us. And leadership goes back to influence. So at our Center for Leadership and Organizational Excellence, we run a series of leadership academies and community-based programs to help leaders develop skills that will help them compete in the 21st century. It's all about teaching and helping leaders and equipping leaders so that they can get results for their employers. And I want our listeners to think about this issue. What if your organization had awesome leaders at every layer from top to bottom? What if your individual performers in your organization knew how to lead and behave appropriately to bring out the very best in the people around them. And we can say from our experience in organizational transformation, it can have a powerful effect on an organization's success, their ability to be sustainable and compete in a world marketplace, but it goes back to helping people retool, if you would. Everybody's using a 5.0, 6.0 version of something, so I'd ask your listeners, if you would, what version are you? So I've met people that have been in a leadership role for 30 years and they're still at a 2.0. They haven't really expanded or developed those skills. So it's really about transformation at an individual level. And that's what we do at the University of Toledo.
Well, one of the reasons that I wanted to have this on the program, we had a couple of series with people who were working in entrepreneurialism and entrepreneurialism studies here in Michigan and in other areas, but also the reality of what it's like to be an employee in the 21st century and the challenges they have. And so that leads me to, I read this book that you wrote. It's called The Successful Career Survival Guide. And the reason I'm saying that is there are so many changes in technology that we're dealing with in the world today, and the hope is that we can survive a career and that adjust with all the changes. So my first question to you, as it relates to this book, is what was your initial impetus for writing this? Why did you decide that this was an important thing to bring to the marketplace, this specific publication?
Several years ago, one of my mentors, Jack Simonetti, who I mentioned earlier, he and I wrote a book through the University of Michigan and Josie Bass Publications called Getting Results. And the primary focus on that book is what does it take to be successful as a business leader and to expand your career? And it came down to the simple fact that you have to have lots of skill sets, but at the end of the day, can you deliver results in your current role for your employer? So over the years, we've expanded that now into working people of every kind of industry and every kind of issue along the way that they might be challenged with to say, what does it take in your business to be successful? And so it's interesting, if you ask a person, top of the head, what's it take to be successful? And I'd ask your viewers today, think about what's it take in your experience to be successful? Well, people say, you got to communicate, you have to know how to negotiate, you've got to know people, it's all about the network and who you know, you've got to be able to work in teams. All right, so I would not disagree with any of that. But if you ask people with a paper and pencil review or an online survey, and you gave them 25, 30 things to pick from, they would probably pick the most important thing as number 1 or 2, your ability to get results. So if I can deliver results, that opens doors for me with regards to my career. If I don't get results my organization needs or that are value added, if you would, then that will stalemate my career or I could get pigeonholed in a place. So the impetus for this book was to take all our research and boil it down with the input of over 10,000 working professionals and say, based on your experience, what's it take to get results? And to no one's surprise, the number one factor was deliver desired results. Develop a track record of delivering desired results. And if that is true, if that's the game, then the next question becomes, is what is my game plan or my process for delivering superior performance and results to my employer, regardless of what kind of work we do? So it's all about developing a personal process that will help you deliver desired results for your employer. And it's all predicated on the fact that your boss has shared with you the roles and goals and responsibilities that are value added for you in your current position. And we know bad bosses are the number one reason why people leave their employers. So what if my boss isn't clarifying those things for me? Well, now it's my responsibility, and it's incumbent on me to be the one who says, all right, I'm going to put in paper my roles, my goals, responsibilities, and I'm going to meet with my boss to clarify where we're at. And lots of things can be used as a trigger. Go into a training program, come back, clarify. An anniversary date, clarify. Not getting a promotion, clarify those things with your boss, and then meet with your boss regularly, because it's all about developing a process, communication, working in teams, learning, continuous improvement at a personal level, so that I can get better results for my employer.
Well, it is interesting of a twist on that, because normally the assumption is that what are the expectations that I have from my boss, not looking at from your perspective of how you present that to them, because that is usually communication being the major problem.
Well said.
What is, and this is kind of, taking this, and let's use an example of a 50-year-old employee at a corporation they've worked for 20 years and they're not going anywhere. They've kind of hit a ceiling and they want to survive. Now, you can have expectations, and let's use a large corporation as an example. you have a fairly, it's not a horrible environment with your boss, but you may not necessarily, you may realize that you're not going to be the CEO. Is how do you then plan, you can have expectations that relates to the job, but what about beyond that? I mean, it's not easy to take risks at that age.
Correct.
But what would you say to somebody who is, they want to survive, but they also want to achieve, but they're stuck because they can't go there? How do you encourage risk-taking at the same time?
Well, that's a great point. And I know there's lots of people out there that have jobs that are less than satisfying, but they have good pay, good benefits, and they're comfortable. So if you're, part one is, if your job isn't providing you with a level of satisfaction or a sense of purpose and attainment in your life, we always tell people, all right, then you look into your community to get some of that satisfaction and invest more in your family to get some of that satisfaction. But if there's still what I call career unrest, I would go back and I would ask, have a discussion with your boss about if you're producing superior performance and results. Sometimes bosses have an incentive to keep you right where you are because it makes life good for them. But I think if you have established yourself as a performer and as a member of the A team and a person who gets stuff done for your enterprise, I think it's perfectly rational and normal to go to your boss and say, I'm ready to take on some new things. What kind of additional opportunities exist for me in this organization? Would it be okay to have some conversations with other parts of the organization that are appealing and interesting to me? Because I think it's easy to become bored in a job if you do it long enough. And boredom is not the friend of excellence, and boredom is not the friend of learning. So to reach out and try to create your own opportunities inside your organization is not a bad thing to do. To network internally, to connect with people across the organization. And big companies have more opportunities than you can shake a stick at if we're willing to get out of our comfort zone and look around. At the same time, we also need to be realistic enough to know that if there is no opportunity and you're not going anywhere and you're bored out of your mind, to take that risk and go ahead and do something different. Seek out another opportunity for yourself. And I work with lots of entrepreneurs, as do you, and we know that a lot of times they were driven wild and crazy by their job, and they just said, I can't do this anymore. And that was the impetus, if you would, to go start their own enterprise, which is not an easy thing, but having said that, though, something caused them to, the straw that broke the camel's back caused them to get up and go. So I would submit that most of us know if our work is satisfying or not, and if we're too dissatisfied for too long, we owe it to ourselves to take action, if you would. So if your dissatisfaction meter is not where you want it to, if it's off the charts and it's not where you want it to be with regards to satisfaction, we need to take action, because nothing's worse than saying this, boy, I coulda, I shoulda, I woulda. Don't live that way, you know. It's not the optimal way to live. And again, it's easy to say when you don't know the circumstances. If you've got kids in school, risk-taking might not, tuition payment, car payment, house payment, those are things that will cause us to stay in one place. But at the same time, don't be afraid to reach out, because you might be better than you think you are.
Well, that's self-confidence is certainly an important part of this. And the other thing that happens, unfortunately, in a lot of industries, and still today with the evolution, technological changes, and so on, you may not necessarily weren't prepared for the fact that your company is downsizing and you're disappearing. An unexpected career change by virtue of a company going out of business or going, you know, that in itself by design is a horror story. Let's assume you have all these constraints, you've got family, and you know, this happens a lot in this world.
It sure does.
How do you, given your scenario and what you're describing, how can you be proactive in knowing you may have to be getting off that sinking ship?
Yeah, I would encourage people, and we have in the book you described, we have 12 career imperatives. One of those career imperatives is have great relationships with people. Part one. Part two, build a network for yourself both inside your organization and outside your organization through community service. So by sitting on boards or volunteering at a local soup kitchen or a community-based enterprise, or engaging people outside your business through a professional association. These are invaluable potential sources of leads for job opportunities, and if you build for yourself, and if you make a spider diagram, if you would, you're in the middle, and who do you know outside your business in your industry, and how do you know them? Who do you know in your community? Who do you network? I had an MBA student who was recently downsized get a job because she sat on a board of directors for a local agency and connected with a person on there who eventually led her to her next job. So by building that network, that's an invaluable source of opportunity. The internet is out there for everybody, but I mean, everybody's using the internet, and that's a great potential source, but don't depend exclusively on jobs coming to you via the internet, if you would. So I think relationships are powerful. Networking inside your own company is really powerful. Knowing your strengths and weaknesses, and if you can meet somebody and give them a 90-second elevator pitch on what you can do to help their company or what you do in your current job that you have world-class talent around, those are powerful selling tools for yourself, if you would. So I would go back and keep yourself current, keep your resume. I encourage people, and I think it's one of the rules in our book, keep your resume updated at least once a year. Take and update that resume. Why? Because you never know. And this isn't to create paranoia, but it's just to say, let me realistically assess where I'm at and where I'm going to go and what I'd like to do right now. But I believe we have more power over our careers than we think we do.
Well, that's a good point. I think another thing is what I liked about what you're saying is I think a lot of people just assume the only way to get a job, they go on Indeed or online. It's like looking at the classifieds when I believe that that's not really, it is the networking,
More
it's
jobs
being
come
involved.
from your personal and private network. Yes, sir.
And so I mean, that's a shock for most people. So your job of assuming you might have a job in the future is how you relate to the larger community and the world around you
Absolutely.
in anticipation of something that might happen because you're involved in more than just that.
Yes, and networks are invaluable outside of work to bring satisfaction in life through church, through volunteering at a soup kitchen, potentially, as I mentioned earlier. There are so many opportunities and so many people in need right now that when we get out and reach into the community, and that's like, so my personal mission in life is and it's not complicated, but I want to inspire people. I want to help people. I want to equip people and help transform people so that they can be successful. So that's my personal mission statement. So I'd ask your viewers, hey, what's your personal mission statement? Regardless of what stage you're at in your career, we probably need to make some alignments. And if you're an empty nester right now, you probably have some extra time that you could put into the community or mentoring at a school program or doing other kinds of things. So if you live your mission, if you would, that really helps not only at work, but also in your life as a whole. And you want to build out a network across lots of different areas of your life to build satisfaction in your life. These are things that we can control. And if you look at any of these research studies on life satisfaction, it's people who are engaged with other people, living with purpose, and making a difference in the world that they can feel good about.
Well, and I like that too because there are people we know who their whole lives are their career and their job, and if that's gone, they don't have this broad range of things to fall back on, which makes that even more difficult if they're having to start over.
Yes, sir. And I just had a lunch with an executive who had poured his entire life into a company in the hopes of someday being the CEO of that enterprise. And he got real close, didn't get the job, and then was let go. And it was devastating because he had put so much time into it. And he said to me a couple days ago, he said, this is one of the best things that had happened to me because it made me look in the mirror, and I had realized that I was one-dimensional. I was work. So I hadn't been putting the time in I needed to my marriage, in fathering my kids, and taking care of my own physical health, and giving back to the community. So this guy went through an epiphany that was brought on by the fact that he lost a job that was really important to him. And you know what's interesting? He survived. He hit the ground running. He did some reassessment in every area of his life. He put together a plan with more purpose. And lo and behold, he was just hired to take over a new position that's his dream job. And again, not all these scenarios turn out this way, but the important point is to be proactive and live in the life you want to lead before a crisis hits you.
Well, and that is the reality in today's world, too, is that people are going to be working longer if they can. The idea of retiring, I mean, the 30 years, get the golden, watch and drop dead in 6 months like it used to be when people were working on the assembly line. We don't have those industries anymore, and people are living into their 70s, into their 80s, and in fairly good health in a lot of instances. But there's also the reality that the technology changes so quickly, and it's hard for older Americans particularly to keep up with the technology. I mean, my mother's 88, and we've got her a phone, and she can't figure, just trying to teach her to use the text message is a challenge, which is true and that is true, even the technology, I look at these pressing file print because that was how I was trained. And again, it is being proactive and realizing that, but the technology is growing so quickly. How are you realistically going to be able to compete if you have to be in a scenario where you're moving on with some kid who's coming out of college that knows how to use the technology? How do you stay at least relevant in that area?
That's a great point. I think it comes back to knowing your strengths and weaknesses in this area, if you would, and allocating time. So a lot of times, I hear this all the time, myself included. I really need to take my tech skills up a notch. All right, so question, what tech skills? Is it your phone usage? Is it how to expand your skill set with a particular platform at work? Is it your ability to work with Excel or Google Sheets, or what does it look like? Identifying what those issues are, and then building a plan to pick up that skill set, because it takes time. And a lot of times we don't allocate appropriate levels of time to this because we're busy doing other things. But if something is truly important, we're going to allocate time and put together a plan to get there. To say, I wish I had better tech skills. I hope I have better tech skills. Wishing and hoping are not improvement strategies, if you would. So if I'm going to target something and I know my job is going to contingent upon it, I'm going to put together a plan to go up to speed. Interestingly, employers are frequently, if I were to go to my employer and say, I have this skill set, I need to upgun, I need to make it better. I've identified a training program. One day, it's $375. Could I get funds? Would you support me in that? People are amazed sometimes, and they come back and say, yeah, my boss said, here, if I can get that skill set, let's go. He'll be happy to pay for it. She'll be happy to pick up the tab. Well, I would go back and say, then why don't we take advantage? But this requires a certain level of proactive thinking. And if we are so busy day in and day out, and we're not taking time to think and reflect, there's a very good chance that it will not happen. I would say at the other end of the continuum, we have our Generation Z and our millennials. And we just conducted a study, and they are struggling when they go to the workforce. They have technology, and this is for our viewers who might be mature in their career. They know how to use technology. They don't know how to solve a problem. They know how to do some very cool things with regards to their phones and their iPads and other things and other platforms that are out in front of this, but they have a hard time focusing, and they don't plan, and there's a tendency to procrastinate around things, and they might not work well in teams. So those are competitive advantages that we as adult members of the seasoned members of the workforce, as are you and I.
Right.
We have that as our competitive advantage. While they might have technology, we have pieces of the puzzle that we're bringing with us based on our experience. So I think this whole thing is, to ask yourself the question, what results is my organization paying me to deliver? Okay, part one. Part two, what activities do I need to engage in that will allow me to get at those results? So the 80-20 rule. What 20% of my activities will help me get at 80% of that nut, if you would, results I want to get at? Maybe it's coaching your people. Maybe it's process improvement. Maybe it's building a better team. Maybe it's hiring better people. But what activities are going to get you there? Now, once you know what those activities are, the question is, are you good at them? So there's nothing stopping any one of us from developing world-class talent around team building, around communication, around coaching other people, around building out a process that's seamless. We can do those things if we allocate the time and resources to do that. So that's the focal point of the Successful Career Survival Guide, is to take people on that walk, if you would, to get them to think about what they're going to do with their career to take it to the next level. And the fun part about this, and I get feedback and emails and Instagrams from all over the place around the book, people say, this really made me think. So the goal is, if we're taking the time to think, we'll probably be more proactive than if we're just in a hurried, reactive state every single day.
Well, that's an interesting analysis, and particularly when you're talking about the Generation Z and the millennials, the whole issues you're talking about, they have no conception of. They don't plan, they don't think, they don't work well in teams. It seems to me this could be more than useful for that generation, as well as more seasoned folks like my age and so on. But you study business, you deal with leadership, you're dealt with students, you've taught for 30 years. You've seen changes in the economy. 20 years ago, 100 years ago, let's say, what were the major corporations in the world? AT&T, Standard Oil.
Sears and Roebuck.
Sears and Roebuck.
Standard Oil, DuPont, Kraft Oil, Kraft Foods and things. Yeah.
Things like that, too. Google, Facebook, service industries. And so technology is changing so fast, and I guess in addition to being proactive and trying to survive within the marketplace is trying to understand how is the marketplace itself changing. And it isn't the same 20 years ago as it will be in 20 years from now. That's the unknown factor.
Yeah, it is.
What do you, and I guess this is more of a philosophical question for you as with your knowledge what is going to happen to the standard workplace itself, the traditional coming in and sitting in an office environment? Do you see with technological changes, even just our assumptions on how work itself is performed changing in the next 20 years?
There's wide scale research on the fact that the workplace of the future will change dramatically with regards to technology and structure and lots of other things. But what's interesting to note in this discussion, embedded in this discussion, is a very simple fact that people will need to become more self-directive. So organizations have been using autonomous work teams, self-directive work teams for 30 years in the U.S. We've done a lot of research in this area. What's happening now is it expanding and expanding and expanding. So one person, instead of their span of control being 8 to 10 people, it might be 40 people. So at the end of the day, if that's the case, I need to become much more focused as an individual on doing the things that are going to bring out the best. I can't sit back and wait for my coach, my boss, to coach me through something. I need to develop a system to be self-regulating and self-monitoring. And I do a lot of work with the senior military leaders in the intelligence community to help them develop skill sets that are really important for competing in this world marketplace from their perspective. And here's what I really appreciate about the Army people. If you talk to folks who have served in the military, and God bless our veterans out there, thank you for your service to our country and the great things that you have done. But if you ask a person who's been in an Army capacity, Sir Jim, they're always careful because they have to go out and hike into dangerous places and to walk into dangerous places on foot.
Right.
They're always careful about what they carry. They don't want to carry too much of the wrong stuff and not enough of the right things. So they're very careful, make sure they got enough water and food, but they also make sure they want ammunition, first aid kit, communication devices. They're really careful, and they know that there's an upper limit to how much they can carry and still be effective. So I believe a lot of us are carrying around work that is no longer value added. And as a word picture, why would we put an activity in our backpack that we're trudging down the road with if it's not helping us move forward? In the future, organizations will streamline. They will reduce more non-value added, non-productive activity. So one of the things we need to get out in front of is what does our backpack of work look like that we're carrying? We want to be able to get rid of things that are no longer value added. And the glue that really holds all the things in that backpack together, it's our communication skills, our network, our emotional intelligence, and our ability to relate with other people. Those are the things that are really transferable skills now and forever. The ability to negotiate, that's a giant skill that a lot of people really struggle with. We have to have that skill set. And so the more self-directed we become, the better off we're going to be. And, if you know, Alfredo Pareto was an economist, a philosopher, a philanthropist, a sociologist, an engineer of all things in Italy back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And he's the guy who coined the 80-20 rule. And you know what he found? He found that in studying countries and companies, about 20% of their activity produces 80% of the value and the profitability of that enterprise. So I encourage people to think about applying the same 80-20 rule to their jobs. So what are 20% of the activities that you engage in that will get you 80% of the results that you're seeking? Our number one job ought to be, if we want to work smarter, identify what those 20% activities are. And again, for a lot of people in leadership positions, it's team building, it's coaching, it's process improvement, it's developing effective communication plans, it's implementing an effective customer relationship management program, lots of things. But we want to focus on doing more of the things that create value and deliver results and fewer of the things that are non-productive and time wasting. And I'd be willing to bet your viewers out there find themselves saying this, I am so busy, I cannot even believe it. And so our next research project, and a big chunk of it's talked about in this book, is what do you do to control your time? And we've created an acronym called STOP. And STOP stands for the simple process of sit, think, optimize, and then perform. Well, a lot of us go to work every day. What do? We just go right to work, and we don't give a lot of thought to it. So the question is, are you and I optimizing our days? Are we optimizing our weeks? Are we optimizing the month and the quarter? And this goes back to really living with a greater sense of purpose and greater intentionality. And that's a really big part of what the future is going to look like for all of us. We're going to have to become more results-oriented and more value-driven, if that makes sense. And those are things, Jim, that we can control to a great extent.
Well, taking control of your life is really the only solution, because the world isn't going to do it for you according to what the reality of how things change and so on. But
Well said.
with this going forward, I guess the question was, we've got this book, you've been teaching at the University of Toledo now for over 30 years.
Correct.
What's on the horizon for you? Have you thought in terms of your own proactive approach? Where do you see yourself, let's say, in 5 years after you've, I'm sure you do your own personal mission statement, but also do you have any plans, either more book, more research? What would you like to be doing in, let's say, the next 5 years?
I'd say the next 5 years, that's a very easy solution. So I want to wrap up my academic career strong. I think a person who's a teacher is always going to be a teacher. A person who is a mentor is always going to be a mentor to other folks. So those are things that I can do post-educationally. I think I'll continue to write. I've got a couple books in me yet, and I think the biggest thing is to make a difference in my community and to make sure that the programs that I run at the University of Toledo are properly built out and funded so that that can be a little bit of a legacy, if you would. So when I leave, those things will function very, very effectively. My wife, Cindy, who we've been married for 31 years, she's the best person I know, Jim, on earth for me. And Cindy is a remarkable person at every level. But we do a lot of mission work overseas, and we do a lot of community service-related stuff. So I think we will be spending more time in the country of Haiti, where we have both spent a lot of time over the last 35 years. We're very actively involved in our church, and we do a number of ministries in the community in that regard to help people who are far less fortunate than are we. And we do outreach work with some people coming out of the prison system. So I think there's a lot of things that we can continue to do to make a difference, if you would. And in addition to the fact that we both like to travel, so there'll be a few things on the horizon, but we're very fortunate to have options, and I'm just very appreciative for all those options being on the table. And I would just throw this out to your viewers, if you would. I think so many people retire and they think that they just want to travel. That's all they're going to be. But my experience is, as you asked me, you need a plan for retirement where you're going to invest that time, that effort, that energy, and you've got game. When you're retired, you still have got game. What are you doing to take that game and to transfer it to the next generation behind you and to give back from that perspective? So don't allow your game to sit on the shelf for too long without making sure you're not sharing it with other people along the way.
Professor Clinton Longenecker is the author of the Successful Career Survival Guide. I want to thank you very much for being a guest today on A2 Insight.
Thank you, Jim. It's a privilege to be here. Thank you for the good work that you do in this community and reaching out, and you're helping people to think, and that's priceless.
Well, and again, until next time, for A2 Insight, I'm James Trost.